Stuani! Oh my goodness, what a story! Keep following this story. This is pure Hollywood. And glory, glory, Girona.
I mean, this counts as Barcelona content, right? Girona FC are having one of the most remarkable seasons in La Liga history. They're currently second in the league with only 4 matches to go. They are guaranteed to be playing in the Champions League next season, and they've done the double over their Catalonia big brother Barcelona. In fact, those are actually the only 2 wins in Girona's 94-year history against their neighbors. They've beaten the likes of Atletico Madrid, Valencia, Villarreal, and Sevilla while playing attack-heavy possession football. They are the leading goal scorer in La Liga, are nearly tied for the most goals scored in the league, and have done all of this with a wage budget outside of the top 10. And on the surface, it seems like this just came out of absolutely nowhere. In fact, just 2 years ago, they were predicted to finish just 19th and had the most likely chance of finishing dead last, which if you look at their promotion story, it makes sense because it was wild. They got promoted by getting the last promotion playoff spot, shithousing their way to a 2-1 aggregate win over third place Eibar with a 91st minute winner with these match stats, by the way. Then they sealed their promotion with 2 second half goals. I mean, you can't really blame anyone for thinking they'd go right back down. And then when they unexpectedly finished 10th, the same position they got the year before being relegated, the consensus was pretty much the same for the 2023-24 season. Very unlikely to get relegated, but will probably finish mid-table. In fact, Girona actually had less than 1% chance of making the top 4. But we know the outcome to this. We know that Girona have done something incredible and have defied all of the odds. In just their 4th ever season in the top flight, they have taken that less than 1% chance to get Champions League football for the first time in their history. Unfortunately, when you look a little bit deeper, it's not a complete fairy tale like Leicester in 2016. In fact, there's something pretty controversial about this Girona side, and of course, it's related to this guy. How is he always consistently popping up here? Why is it always him? Now, the reason why this Girona side is so controversial is because of their ownership, the City Football Group. This group is part of an overarching investment started by the Abu Dhabi United Group, who is majority owned by Sheikh Mansour, the Manchester City owner. So while Girona isn't 100% backed by this specific wealthy individual like Manchester City, they have most, if not all, of the same connections and ties to player development, scouting, and player training. I mean, they've trained at the City Ground the past 5 seasons. They even have their own Guardiola, because Pep's brother, Pere, is the board president, not to be confused with the actual president of the club. Apparently the difference is that the board president, that Pere is, actually tries to set the policy, while the actual president just executes it. So if I understand this correctly, Pere does a lot of the heavy lifting, because while he was crucial for the takeover made by the City Football Group in August of 2017, his work for Girona actually started a few years prior. City and Girona actually had connections back in 2015, when City would sign young players from Spain, but then send them on loan to Girona, kind of like an affiliate club. However, when the full takeover was actually completed in August of 2017, a change in philosophy was made. When the takeover was completed, that was the same year that Girona got promoted into La Liga for the very first time. And realizing that the club didn't have much money, the board, namely Pere Guardiola, switched from trying to get young players to having Manchester City buy older and experienced players and then loan them to Girona. I mean, why else do you think Pablo Mari was bought by Manchester City? I mean, the dude never made an appearance for them. Unfortunately, due to the experienced players not being as good as the young players, and the young players usually rejecting a loan move to Girona, they got relegated after 2 seasons in the top flight. And because of the huge difference in TV revenue between these 2 leagues, Girona was in trouble. To quote their sporting director at the time, in terms of budget, it was tough because the budget was going down and it was getting harder and harder to fight for promotion. So 4 years into their official takeover, and Girona's situation was looking a hell of a lot different than Manchester City's situation. City had already won the title at this point in their own takeover, and while that would have been a miracle for Girona, I don't think they were expecting to be struggling financially in the 2nd tier of Spain. However, in their most dire situation, the club made 2 decisions that would change their entire future. One was changing their buying philosophy yet again, and that would be to try to sign players on a free or for cheap instead of trying to loan all of them in. The second was hiring Michel. The hiring of Michel was a pivotal point in Girona's journey to the top. Michel has a history of saving clubs from relegation as well as helping them get promoted. In fact, his two previous jobs included a few seasons at Rayo Vallecano and at Huesca. At Vallecano, he was hired midway through the 2016-17 season when they were in 19th and managed to not only steer them away from relegation, but even get them into an 11th place finish. The following season, they won the entire league and got promoted into La Liga. For the 2019-2020 season, he went to Huesca and did the exact same thing, win the league and gain promotion to La Liga. So of course, when Girona had failed to gain promotion the previous two seasons, it made sense to hire Michel, and just like his previous jobs, he helped earn Girona promotion to the top flight. Hiring Michel not only helped the club in the present, but it also had positive ramifications for the future. Even though they drastically changed their transfer policy, they still had connections to Manchester City, which allowed some really great loans like Savio and Yan Couto. However, like I mentioned, they really wanted to try to sign those young players permanently, rather than just always loaning them in. And with Michel doing so well, that attracted the interest of some of their talents. Alex Garcia, for example, was a former City player on loan at Girona, but he was eventually let go as his contract with City ran out. When Michel was hired, Girona signed Garcia on a free transfer when he was only 24 years old and has been a staple in the side this season. And after being promoted, these types of signings have become more frequent. They were able to sign the Ukrainian duo of Zagankov and Dovbyk for less than 13 million combined, convinced a highly respected veteran of Daily Blind to join on a free transfer, they got a consistent Premier League keeper in Gazzaniga for free, they got a loan move for Eric Garcia, who's a Barcelona product, and they bought Porto for only about 1.5 million, who single-handedly destroyed Barcelona in 9 minutes with 3 goal contributions. He was so fast with his first goal that FUTMAP has him scoring before even being subbed onto the pitch. So taking all of the context into account, this is why it's such an odd and rather controversial situation. On one hand, this club was indeed taken over by a group that is majority owned by the wealthy owner of Manchester City. They have certain connections that other clubs could only dream of having, including a direct link to arguably the best team in the world, which is where a few of their star players have been loaned from in recent years, like Savio and Yan Couto. It's fairly hard to say whether or not they could have gotten some of these players in the first place without their connections, regardless of the price. On the other hand, this club doesn't have the deep pockets like Manchester City. Yes, they were able to get a few talented players on loan, but that's also not exactly a new thing because affiliate and feeder clubs have been around for a while. Girona's thinner wallets have also made themselves change philosophies when needed in the past, instead of just being bailed out from their poor decision making. This also means that their signings, whether it be on loan, permanent, or from a managerial standpoint, have to be spot on because they can't afford to throw money around like Manchester City. Not only have a lot of their transfers been hits, but players like Gazzaniga, Gutierrez, Daily Blind, and Martinez are a mixture of young and experienced players coming in for a low price on a free transfer or from the academy, while their most expensive signing, Artem Dovbyk, again the leading goal scorer in the Liga, only cost them about $8 million. And lastly, let's not forget that their manager appointment has been virtually flawless thus far, and arguably the most important signing that the club has ever made in their entire history. Again, it's fairly hard to say if they could have gotten some of these players without their connections, but they haven't exactly put a foot wrong with their limited budget either. I mean, they could have basically just done what Everton did on a smaller scale and just wasted all of their money. So like I said, it's a very controversial situation because no one wants to see another Manchester City or a club rebranded into an energy drink. Some La Liga fans are not happy with how Girona has progressed, but others are excited to see a different club competing and potentially shake things up at the top end of the table. At the moment, however, regardless of your feelings toward the club, Girona will be celebrating their first ever Champions League finish with a squad that had less than 1% chance of making it happen, and they have every single right to do that. That is until they rack up 115 charges like Manchester City.